All righty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. We're your hosts, Brendan and Sean. And excited for this next one. Sean is our first time really chatting since his time up at the Copper Basin. And so I'm just excited to kind of hear a little bit about that and kind of talk about the race and what you saw and everything. How's everything going your way, man?
I think I'm almost recovered from that experience. Yeah. Firstly, I want to say your head is as smooth as I've ever seen it.
Yeah, baby.
Mr. Clean over there.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I ran the race 6 years ago. I kind of didn't have a full appreciation for what all went into it from every other perspective, the race organizing and putting in the trail. And certainly the most that I didn't understand how tough it is for handlers. Uh, you're getting almost as little sleep as the mushers are. Uh, and that was, I'm also just maybe a little softer than I might have been back in the mushing days. I don't know, but that hit me pretty hard. And I was also kind of a little sick coming into the weekend. I was kind of coming in, just kind of coming down from a sickness. And then I didn't sleep much and I was outside in the cold, and then I just kind of got a little more of a cough and more of a runny nose. And oh my God, it's poor me. But it was, it was really amazing experience to engage with all the people involved in that event. And, might just be doing it again next year. Who knows? But yeah, really fun weekend and difficult, and a really, will be a lasting memory for sure.
Right on, man. Yeah, I feel like the last few recordings that you and I have had with the intros, there's been the common theme of someone's not feeling good. I'm still like not fully there either. So 'tis the season, whatever. But so yeah, you were handling for Matt Pavelio, is that right?
Mm. Matt Pavelio and Sean Williams. Um,
Oh, so
and
you were doing a duel, 2 for 1 kind of thing?
yeah, it was a twofer, but Matt had his wife and kid. Well, not, I mean, she's 16 and she's run the junior. I did her out 3 times. So Matt's daughter, TG's a totally an asset out there. But yeah, it was those 2 girls and me, and then Kel Casey was kind of helping us out, but he had more priority on like the media side of things. And then like if he had the spare time to help, and he certainly did, he was there too. But yeah, I was kind of driving the dog truck, and yeah, it was essentially handling for 2 teams. So that definitely made it a little extra difficult. But we pulled it off, and we did it as a team, and yeah, it was cool. I got to know Sean Williams pretty well. He's got a crazy, I got to hear his story about how the Iditarod ended and for him last year. And he's like, you can just tell he's been mushing for a long time. He ran the Copper Basin 15 years ago and hasn't run it since then. So he ran it in
Wow.
2009, and he was just like when I ran it 6 years ago. He was very green, and he got to the finish line, but learned a lot. And you can see, just the way that he's um, caring for his dogs, and how, his body language is out there. You can just see he's confident with his dogs, and it showed.
Right on, man. One thing that I wanted to ask you about in terms of handling at a race, I'm just kind of like, if you can let some of the listeners in on that experience, like what for this race specifically, because I know each race is a little bit different. What did that look like for you? Like you talked about your driving around the dog truck. I assume you're going from checkpoint to checkpoint. You're trying to get there before they get there. Um, but beyond that, is there like what more goes into things?
I mean, that's pretty accurate. That's kind of how it is. It's not, uh, you get them out of the start line, and then you drive to the next checkpoint, and you're there, if they needed to drop a dog, or you're there to help them park their dog team. That's your responsibility as the handler to, find where they're going to park their team and lead their team to that any way that is helpful. You show them, you get them their straw and their drop bags that we have in the truck that we drove there. And then you are going to see where's everything in the checkpoint that the musher needs to know about. So the biggest thing is water for your dogs. Is there hot water? Is there cold water? Is there any water at all? And if there is, where is it? You're not allowed to get that water for them, but you certainly point it out. You tell them, hey, this is the spot you can go and sleep in. This is where there's some chili for you to eat. And give them all that information, and then just be supportive. You're allowed to talk to them. You're not allowed to help in any way with dog care. You can't take off booties. You can't make the dogs beds, or you can't undo tug lines and neck lines, or massage or pet dogs at all. The only time you're really ever allowed to, touch the dogs is just getting them parked. And really, you're not even touching the dogs when you do that. You're really just grabbing the lines in between the dogs and kind of guiding them, because it is a little bit tricky getting into and out of some of these checkpoints with other dog teams around. And there's just like, sometimes it's easier than others, but that's essentially, you do that. And then when they leave, you rake up their straw and scoop the poop or whatever, grab their booties and grab whatever they left of their drop bags. And then you get it back on the road and drive to the next checkpoint. And every checkpoint, some checkpoints were only like 30, 40 minutes away from the others, but there was at least one checkpoint was over 2-hour drive, and it's a 6-hour dog run or whatever. So, you clean up for an hour and pack up or whatever. You get on the road, drive for 2.5 hours, maybe make a stop at a gas station, then get there. And, especially, and then you get there and it's like daytime and you haven't slept all night, but now the sun's out and you're kind of awake for some reason. So maybe you don't take your nap and you hang out with the people that you see, and then your team comes in and you're there. You want to kind of be there while they're doing chores. I wasn't there though. I was like, dude, you're going to be doing, your dog team's here for 5 hours. They said some people have their handlers just staring at their dog team for all 5 hours, just in case, like, there's a dog chewing on the gang line or chewing on a jacket, or there's a fight happens or whatever drama. And that's probably more important in the first checkpoint. But as the race goes on, the dogs are all just kind of keen to sleep and take advantage of their rest. So, but still, people would just sit there and kind of watch over the team. I asked Sean, I was like, do you want me to watch your team for the next like 5 hours? And he was like, dude, they just ran 68 miles, like over like an insane, like several thousand feet of elevation gain. Like, they're going to sleep. You're good. I was like, all right, cool. Cause I wasn't really, was kind of offering it like as a, like, it was kind of a half-ass offer. I was really hoping you would say no, so I was like, come on, yeah.
So, I know some races, like the traveling from checkpoint to checkpoint for the handler, can be kind of like a pain or whatever, whether it's on the road system or like maybe you're on kind of crappy roads. Was there any of that involved in this, or is it at least kind of like an easy drive outside of that 2-hour drive you're talking about?
Yeah, that wasn't that bad of a drive. It was snowing, by your standards, or by anyone in Atlanta standards, it was a terrible drive. It's the worst drive ever. But, it's just like, we had a good truck, good tires. It was snowing a little bit. But it really wasn't a problem. When we went to Lake Louise later in the race, there's like a 16-mile, not quite dirt road, but it's certainly a bumpy road. So you're kind of going slow on that. And especially because we had a trailer in our setup. A lot of people have their dog boxes in the bed of their truck instead of pulling behind like we were. So I just got to go slower with the trailer. But the biggest thing is just battling being tired. You're just when you're driving, a lot of times you're doing that hour drive and it's 3 in the morning and it's just
Right.
harder to stay alert.
Yeah.
So you're singing a song or, doing whatever you can to stay alert on the road and not be driving off. And usually something happens every year where there's some kind of incident with a truck. This year, of course, there still was, but it wasn't the fault of any driver. One of the dog trucks, the wheel just came off like
Ooh,
while going down the highway, and
that's gonna leave a mark.
yeah, it was actually Dallas's handler, which is his girlfriend, was driving, and yeah, the wheel just came off, and so she was able, luckily, next to it, pulled over, and Casey has it all probably documented somewhere on his YouTube or Facebook or whatever. But yeah, the Andy Pohl and Aaron Anderson, who are handling for Christy Barrington, helped like MacGyver the wheel back on there, and Kale was there helping as well, and you know, uh, they were able to figure that problem out because that was the only choice you had. There's no, it's pretty remote area where we were.
Right. Right on. Well, I want to kind of get into the race. I kind of just thought it would be nice to kind of ask you a couple questions about just like what you were up to and a little bit of like the behind the scenes, which you kind of gave. And I love that we're able to kind of kill two birds with one stone. You're out there handling for two different teams. You're putting out pictures, videos from the race at the different checkpoints. So to anyone who's LinkedIn on our Instagram and Facebook, you got to see all of that. So shout out, good work there, my guy.
Yeah, I just gotta give credit to Kale out there. He was, helping me out with handling, but just there was times where I went and took a nap and then he went back out to get more footage. That happened on multiple occasions. So, yeah, it's not just Kale, someone like there's Donna, who's a race official that was at the Connect 200 last weekend. She's here at the Copper Basin this weekend. She's going to be at the Quest 300 in 2 weekends, and she's going to be out on the Iditarod Trail for 2 weeks. So she's just doing that for free. You know, 4 different races. She's probably going to be home for 2 weeks in January, February, and March, maybe 4 weeks. I don't know. So it's incredible what people are sacrificing to help out with this race. And I asked a lot of people why you do this, and I still don't really understand their answer, but they like it, I guess. I don't, but it's 100% volunteer run event. No one's just like doing this and pocketing, $2,000 or whatever for the weekend's work or a few hundred. It's like, it's all just your free time is you're just out in the cold, not sleeping for 3 nights and 3 days. And it's anomaly as where else do you see that, you know, where you
Yeah,
don't get paid and you do something like that. And there's not just one or two or 10, there's like dozens of people doing this. So it's cool to hang out with them, and they just get really excited about being a part of an event that is as special as the Copper Basin. And I think that's why you see a lot of people coming back every year, because it's just the people and the dogs around it.
yeah. It seems like there's a good tradition with that race. So what were if you had to like give me two or three big stories or takeaways or anything like that, what are you gonna hit me with first?
Mm. I would say I don't really know who Josie Thur is, but
Yes.
that's probably like a new name to be on the radar for competing for Rookie of the Year in the Iditarod. Certainly, she was the Rookie of the Year in the Copper Basin, and I think she has her own kennel. I didn't get a chance to talk to her. She just kind of very quietly got a 6th or 7th place finish, and that was really impressive. I think near her as well was maybe Annette something. Yeah, Annette Lanes, and isn't that the same thing? I'm not sure what her story is,
Or is
but
it Yanes? Yanes? There's a
maybe
double L, dude. You
it
know,
could be.
like
Yeah, the double L. Yep.
Yama,
Just like
Yanes.
those two names are really impressive to be seventh and eighth place. I think that was one of the things that really stood out to me. Just keep scrolling down. Um, let's see. So, Mike Parker, he had that terrible dog accident on the Denali Highway just a week or 2 weeks ago, maybe. And, you know, I think about for some reason this comes to mind of it's like when the Grateful Dead lost Jerry Garcia, they went out and went back on tour within a week later, and Mike lost some of his best sled dogs, whether or not they were good sled dogs, they were his best friends, and he lost them in a horrific way, and he got back out there, you know, and his team crushed it. Top 20 in the Copper Basin. He's got a killer mustache. He's a really fun guy. And
Dude, I
I
love the
think
mustache. I love that
his
mustache.
his dogs were like really fun to just they got like I didn't really get to like engage with them, personally, but just looking at like their like body language, they just look like really fun personalities. And it's fun to you've got this team of white dogs. It definitely stands out. There's no doubt whose team that is when they come rolling into a checkpoint. But um, and right behind him, Emily Ford. She was running Anna Hennessy's Iditarod team, who's owned by Kathleen Frederick. Matt Pavelio ran that team in the 2022 Iditarod. Emily, I don't know what her mushing experience is. She's an accomplished outdoors woman, according to Kathleen. Spent a lot of time outside in the winter. So respectable finish from a new name in the race and in the mushing scene. It's just, I think, a testament to all these new names we're seeing. Sadie Lindquist, who did, and Laura Kittleson, both running Mitch Seavey teams, running back-to-back weekend races, a tough Knick 200, a tougher Copper Basin 300. Really impressive for them to finish both those races. Their team the teams were firing in and out of checkpoints, and they were, giving them plenty of rest. And it's fun to see that kind of mushing where you're just like, you know what, you got young dogs. They could do it in a few hours quicker, but let's just give them some extra rest and make it fun for them and kind of set them up for a good sled dog career. And I could talk about every single one of these names. Daniel Klein, he's running a Ryan Reddington team, and he's just got into mushing. He's 64.
Wow.
Just
That's
learning how to
awesome.
mush. He, uh, you know, I I was really impressed with his attitude out there. Ryan was a handler for him and Hunter, and Ryan had help from his buddy Tyler. But Ryan was coaching the whole time, giving Daniel some advice. And, I heard Daniel ask Ryan, how do you deal with the sleep deprivation? And, Ryan was giving a couple of pointers. You could see Daniel was really struggling with that. So much so that he actually took a wrong turn on the last run.
Yeah, I
And
saw
he
that.
did a extra, I don't know how many miles, at least 10 extra miles, maybe
Yep.
20, and still like got that team turned around. Hunter Keefe kind of met him coincidentally ish, somewhat planned to met him on the trail and basically caravanned with him to say, hey, I'm gonna kind of run in front of you and your team has me to follow, and it's totally within the rules to do that. And he helped get Daniel to the finish line. Who's to say he probably would have been able to do it without that, but it was just a little extra support.
Sure.
Yeah, I got plenty more to say, but go ahead and chime in.
Yeah, I mean, the I'm glad when I asked you initially the question that you brought up Josie and Annette, because that was something that I had on my list to ask you about. Um, and so I'm super impressed as you are with the fact that those are some names that aren't as familiar, that we're not as familiar with in the mushing scene here in Alaska. And so, I should say here in Alaska like I'm here in Alaska, but I should really say there in Alaska. I'm dreaming about being there though, like I'm here.
It's only a matter of
Uh,
time before we get you out here, dude. It's just I'm just chipping away at you, just taking.
dude,
Just
keep
I know
every
that
day.
I know you're in, and Jessica would be down too, but she's got parents there. But I mean, like, dude, it's just like imagine that, like, I'm just taking one straw away from the pile that's keeping you in Atlanta. Just one straw every time.
Every
Eventually there'll
time.
be nothing keeping you.
Yep. Um, but yeah, I mean, obviously, you didn't mention it up at the top, but the race between really a majority of the race I thought was just between Brent and Jesse. I guess early on before the Mando 6 with the time differential built in. I think Nick was kind of making a run there in the front end. Matt Hall was also kind of in the run, but in my mind, the race for the win was back and forth really between the two of them. I'm curious what your eyes saw with their teams, or just if you were able to talk to them, anything like that.
I got to me and Ryan every checkpoint. He'd be like, "Who do you think's gonna win, man?" It was fun talking to him. I like Ryan. He, but yeah, we were talking. It actually looked like Brent was quite a ways ahead for a lot of the middle and the back end of the race, but he did take 30 minutes less rest at the first checkpoint. Um, and Jesse Holmes so Brent took 3 hours. Jesse Holmes took 3.5, and Cody, he took 4, and Matt took 3.5. I'm not sure what Paige took, but so it looked like Brent was like 45 minutes ahead, but he was really like 15 minutes ahead. And so he was a lot closer than it looked. And so I wasn't surprised to see a 2-minute difference between him and Jesse at the end, let's say. Uh,
Okay.
Brent, also of note, after Emily Robinson edged him out there at the Connect 200, Brent was using his Yukon Quest and Iditarod sled in this 200-mile race. And, it certainly was one thing. It did certainly slow him down a little bit, compared to Emily, who's probably 90 less pounds than Brent,
Yep.
and her sled was super light. And so it certainly plays a factor. And so Brent this week used I can't remember the name of the sled. It's like a Dannon or something. We talked about it all weekend, but it was a new brand that I wasn't familiar with. But it's a super light sled. Like you could pick it up with like 2 fingers. And he like he brought a backpack with him so that he could take gear out of the sled and put it in the backpack in the case that he would have to put a dog in the sled that had gotten sore or
Oh,
had some kind of
wow.
issue. So but like that would be not ideal to say the least. And so that's why he finished with 8 dogs, because if there was just like the slightest thing that might be wrong with his team, one of his team dogs in his team, he was like, I'm dropping that dog, dude, if you're not 1000% ready to go to the next checkpoint.
Yep.
But yeah, he won by 2 minutes. So it's pretty safe to say that him having that lighter sled did win him that race. Like if he was rocking a sled that was 3 times heavier, he might have not won by those short 2 minutes. Jesse's team seemed to be getting stronger and stronger as the race went on, which is kind of cool to see. And then I think a huge story is top 4 teams. Half of them are Squid Acres teams. And it was really cool to see Cody and Paige were kind of out there like we'll see what happens. These guys are like they're like younger, but they're like getting kind of at the beginning of their prime age. So this is kind of the first like properly competitive race that like group of dogs had run, and they split their teams evenly, which is kind of obvious considering they finished third and fourth. And this was the first time in Squid Acres history that Cody beat Age in a race.
Oh
Yeah.
shit! Let the shit talking begin.
So that was kind of fun. And I saw Paige at the start and she was like, "Hey, am I like on your fantasy mushing team?" And I was like, "Nah, you're not, It's like I don't ever know which team's gonna
Paige,
what with you
Paige,
guys.
I had you. By the way, shout
I think
out.
I
I
ended
had
up
you.
she like convinced me to put her on her team. So I think I had her on my team. I'm not sure, but she's like, and she said that at the beginning. She's like, I've never lost to Cody in a race. And I was like, huh, okay, all right, I'll put Paige in my team. And then sure enough,
Of
Cody
course, the
Cody
one
beats her
time
out.
I pick her. Yeah, thanks, Paige. Appreciate that.
And Matt Hall had a strong race. He was Paige just barely edged him out at that last run. Nick T he has won this race I think 5 times in a row going into this, which is insane accomplishment that might not ever get beaten. Um, but yeah, it wasn't in it. His team he went for it early, and then once he saw that his team wasn't at that level to be able to kind of run a winning pace, he dialed it back a little bit, took a couple
Yep.
extra breaks. And I think that's an admirable quality in a musher, not just kind of continuing to go for it and then having your team like slow down. He finished pretty strong with in sixth place. It's better to finish stronger in sixth place than it is to, finish in fourth with a tired team. So I think that was kind of admirable. Dallas is he wasn't trying to win this thing, but I think he was trying to get better than maybe better than ninth place. But it was a tough trail, dude. It was hard to predict, how slow this trail was. It was kind of more of that sugary stuff that we saw in the Knick. A lot of slow run times, and it was really physical for the dogs. There's a lot of parts of the trail where they're sinking in to all their legs are sinking all the way into the trail. So it's really physical runs for these guys. And so, that is that if you went and ran a really aggressive race with a team that wasn't in really, really good physical condition, it was kind of a risky endeavor. So, I think Dallas was taking it easy on the first run, and then the trail was kind of crappier for the people who took it easy on the first run, ironically. So people in the front had the better trail. 4 or 5 teams go by, and now you see all these run times just plummet. So the Brent Sass I think he had an 8-hour and 20-minute run from Chistachina to Myers Lake, and Sean Williams, who I was handling for, he had a 10-plus-hour run. And, obviously Sean's team isn't on Brent's level, but, to have a almost 2-hour difference between run times, it says something about the trail probably too, obviously the dog teams play a factor as well.
I mean, only 4 teams broke 11 hours.
That's crazy. Broke. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I was
Cody,
looking at the 50-55. Maybe I was looking at the run into Lake Louise, maybe. But Brent said, it says, wait. Don't go over. No, wait, chill out. Brent had a 9-hour and 45-minute run, which is a 68-mile run. Now looks like it was no, that's time out. That's time out. So it doesn't say the length of the run. So here we go. We got 9:45 minus 3:39.
So 6 and change.
That's not right. There's no way he ran that shit in Chistachina to Myers Lake was 6 hours and 6 minutes. That's insane.
We might not be looking at it right, folks.
I don't know. I don't know about that. Yeah, there was. I did see some issues on the website with some wrong times and wrong checkpoints, but maybe this is right. I'm not sure. We're gonna have to like to
We'll
have a
have to
6 hour run for 68 miles. That's and that was the hump. You guys know about the hump? You know about the hump, Brennan?
I'm a little bit aware, but let's go ahead and make sure everyone else knows.
Yeah, it's like the hilliest run. It's from Chistachina to Myers Lake, and it's certainly probably the most difficult run, but it is the second run, so you got like a little more steam behind your dog team. Um, but yeah, it's I think next year they were talking about trying to set up some kind of media camp or maybe a hospitality stop at the top of the hump, and it's so it's like I think you have several like thousands of feet of elevation gain on that run. And I think the peaks out at 4,000 plus feet elevation. Um, so it's a super challenging run, and uh, 68 miles long, and it's also the longest run of the race.
Right.
With no checkpoints.
Right. Well, right on. Is there anything else you want to look at in
Oh,
terms of
no, 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 no.
times?
Okay, now I see what we were doing wrong on the times. That's time in and time out. So that's the rest at the checkpoint. So if you look at like the time in for Brent Sass is 3:39. And if you look at the time out from the previous checkpoint, that's the time. That's the running time. So 3:39, remember that, and then go to Chistachina. And you see Brent's time out from Chistachina was 7:20. So 7:20 to 12:20 is 5 hours, to 3:20 is 8 hours and 20 minutes ish. So I was right on that. And then so that was an insanely fast
Good job,
run.
man. Good job. You were right, man. Good job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I know.
Way to go. Yep.
I remember
right.
things.
Okay, cool.
Fuck you. I hate you.
Hey.
So yeah, that was a tough run. That was a run that made or break people's races. Being able to pull it off smoothly with your dog team. A lot of people just split that run in half.
You're right. So yeah, is there anything else numbers wise or finish wise that you want to look at here? I feel like we could talk about this for much longer, but in the interest of keeping this to the intro, and not doing like an hour long intro,
It wouldn't be the worst thing. Well, I think a lot of teams that took a break during that 68-mile run finished in front of the teams that didn't, especially in like the middle of the pack. And it's a really hard thing to do because your second run in the race, like if you're signed up for a 300-mile race, your second run isn't really going to be like the dogs aren't going to slow down in the second run. And so it's kind of hard to like have the self-control to stop and camp your team because they're kind of firing on all cylinders, and they certainly could go 68 miles straight and not lose any speed really. But you'll see the effects of that decision, maybe not the next run, but maybe the run after. And you'll see a drop in speed. And that isn't a universal truth, right? For the top teams, they've trained bigger miles. Their dogs have experienced the competitive schedule, not just this winter, but previous winters. They have that cumulative experience in training. And this year, certainly Brent and Dallas and Nick and these top teams, Paige and Cody, they've trained their dogs to run, some pretty big miles, some tough training series. But then there's a lot of teams that were in this race whose dogs hadn't done that, but still did really well. Trevin Hunter, I talked to him. He ran the Dallas CV team. His team, I think, had, a little over 1,000 miles, which is a good amount, but not a lot. And they had a lot of experience. He had a really experienced team, probably a couple Iditarod champions on that team. But he took it nice and slow and took a ton of extra rest, way above the minimum rest. And he finished up in 16th place. Samantha uh, was running the other Dallas CV team. We got 6 CV teams in this race. Dallas's team
Wow.
was, of course, Dallas. Calvin Doherty finishing a 10th, a strong 10th place. Dude, that kid, he's not a kid, he's an adult. He's running the Iditarod his rookie year. This year, he's Larry Doherty's son, and I mean, that's a pretty impressive finish there at 10th place. Jonah Bacon running Deke Nackaborn's um, dogs, and I was like, dude, I think I'm gonna put you on my fantasy team. I told him at the start line, because he's tried to be competitive in other races, and I was like, I know he's gonna, probably. Deke said he's
Try to
probably
send
kind of
it.
gonna kind
Yeah.
of go for it within reason. And yeah, dude, he's a bargain, dude. He was like $2,000 on fantasy mushing and finished 11th place. So keep an eye on Jonah. Christy
That didn't
Barrington.
didn't help you beat me, but
Yeah, I didn't
it's
do.
fine. Whatever.
Yeah. Well, we got to come back to that, but Christy I was really impressed with what she was doing out there. She took a lot of extra rest, and her team was constantly passing teams on on the last 3 runs, just taking them down. Just she had a really fast team and was passing a lot of those people that finished behind her. So that was kind of cool to see, and it was a really fun race, man. Yeah.
Nice. I know I could just tell that you're like, I could easily just keep talking about this.
Yeah. I should probably shut my mouth.
Um, in terms of this is one question I want to ask you. So we had 28 finishing teams. So let's look at 15 to 28. This, Sean Williams down to Misha. What team that finished after the 15th spot looked like really good? Like you were kind of talking about like Trevin took a lot of extra time. Like what did you see in the back half of the pack that you were like, man, that team looked really good, or just anything of note in that regard?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, Trevin's team was barking and screaming and lunging, and literally like they had to set the snow hook and have someone kind of, when he went to go take a picture with his leaders, he couldn't just kind of stand on the brake. He had to have someone stand on the brake and stand on the snow hook. That's always a good sign there at the finish. I didn't see all these guys at the finish or anything. It was pretty demanding
Sure,
to be able to pull that off. But um, yeah, like I said, I thought Daniel Klein might end up having to scratch like a heartbreak situation, making that wrong turn. That was huge. And Under Keefe helping him out. Um,
nice.
Sean, it was kind of cool to see him. He went for it with his that last run. You kind of had the option to leave Lake Louise and run straight to the finish line, and I think that ended up being like in the 70s for the mileage. I can't know exactly the distance, but a lot of people skipped Tulsana Lake and went straight, especially the front runners certainly did that. Sean, I only know this because I was handling for him, but he took like an hour and a half break, and he just kind of like let them hang out for a second, gave him a quick snack, and kept going. It's cool to hear his like strategy on that run. He's asking a lot of his dogs, so he took a lot of breaks and he snacked them every hour. And they said they were just housing food. Like every time they snack, they just eat like 2-3 snacks each. And when they probably ate 3,000-4,000 calories just in those last 50 miles. And so that's kind of, I didn't know that. Like that kind of, it makes a lot of sense, and it's kind of obvious when I say it out loud. But like when you're going to ask your dogs to, take a short break, you're taking a short break, you're taking an hour and a half long break, but you're doing 30 miles and then almost 50 miles, almost 30 and almost 50 miles. You got to do something different. And to, take it, don't ask too much of them, and let's take those breaks on the hour, get you some snacks. And he, got to the finish line and they'd eaten all the snacks he had in his bag, and he brought a lot. Um,
Nice.
so that's kind of cool. And, you know, uh, Sadie and Laura, they were just a fun couple. They're not they weren't planning on running together, but their teams all trained together, and they did have slightly different. They weren't planning on just being tandem Christy and Anna kind of race, but that's just kind of how it worked out. They started seventh and eighth, and they really just stayed together most of the race. But their teams looked really solid, and I was really impressed with Emily's run, and um, Kelsey Winters was really far up in front early, and I was like, whoa, and I think she's the handler for Jake Whitcop, is my understanding. And so she got some really good dogs, but I think maybe she saw something in her team and she had to take a lot of extra rest at the end and keep her team happy and moving along the trail with that's what you do. Your teams start slowing down. You just take some more rest, give them some more recovery time, get them eating good. And when they're ready, they'll let you know. That's what she did. It looks like, I don't know exactly what happened with Jake, but I think he just had a couple of dogs that got dinged up in that soft trail, and he was running a top 5 pace those first 2 runs, and he's running the Iditarod. So I think once he saw what he saw, and he was like, you know what, I don't really want to push this. I certainly could, but I'm not going to. So he was happy to see his B team though make it across the finish line.
Nice. Well, that's good work, good observations, good analysis. I love it. We have talked for a good amount about the Copper Basin, so I'm happy about that. One thing that I wanted to ask you get your opinion. So back-to-back weeks, we've got the Knik, we've got the Copper Basin, and Brent is at the front of both of those in what ends up being 2 minutes difference, I think, in both races for the win and for the second place. So my question, I'm over here thinking, oh, okay, well, he's clearly starting the season off strong. He's kind of letting people know that, he's making his presence known. What's your take? Are you like impressed with what he's done? Are you like this is kind of par for the course? Just kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I talked to Brent the most I've ever talked to him in the last couple weekends. He's super nice. He said he would love to come on the podcast, and he said, he's like, dude, if I'm showing up to these races, I'm coming all the friggin' way from Joe Bush Creek, 3 hours from Fairbanks, and then all the way down to friggin' Glen Allen. He's gonna come here and try to win the race. That's just, and I was telling him like, yeah, Dallas is probably just using it more of a training run for his team to see a new trail and be around a bunch of other dog teams, and that has its own value. But he's just like, dude, I could get my training series in with my dog team out in Joe Bush Creek. If I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna go out and be competitive. So that's what we saw. That's what we're gonna continue to see. He's not running the Cusco, is my understanding, but. Yeah, I think with the Iditarod, certainly he's one of the strongest dog teams in the race. Dallas is right there next to him. Jesse's right there next to him. Now we got these 2 squid teams from the Copper Basin that are going to be condensed down into one squid team, I believe, for the Iditarod. Yep. And that's not to mention, what's her face? Can't remember her name out of the Yukon territory, but she was in the Knik last weekend. But there's a lot of these competitive teams that are going to be in the Iditarod. I think for Brent, it's how does he start the race? You have this strong team. Is he going to start kind of aggressively out in front, first place? Sometimes that works out great and you win the 2022 Iditarod like that. But sometimes it's like the 2023 Iditarod. You see your team start to slow down. Well, he had his own issues with his teeth or whatever infected. I'm not really sure on the nitty gritty details of that, but his team, all I know is his team was slowing down before those runs. And so I'm just, I'm wondering, is he gonna I'm not going to call it conservative start, but like, what I might like to see is just not just sending it right out into way out in front in the first place. His dogs are good enough to pull that off, but they can't pull it off every time. And so it'd be kind of cool to see maybe being in the top 5 for the first 300 miles instead of number 1, and then keeping his team strong and surging forward. So I think it's kind of how those first 300 miles goes for Brent might dictate. So maybe he will be aggressive, and maybe that's going to work out. But I think it's just a way smaller margin for error. But you're trying to win the damn Iditarod, you're trying to win it. I don't know. That's kind of
the you talking, answering that question has me over here. Kind of the wheels are turning, and I'm starting to think. And so I got to ask it because we might as well get this on here too. So I would say there's a handful of Iditarod mushers that are high mileage mushers leading into the race. And I feel like you combine the high mileage with kind of trying to start hot from the get-go. I feel like that you're walking a fine line there. Again, this is me. I don't know shit. I've never stepped hardly on a sled before, right? So this is me just kind of like theorizing.
But you have gone 5 miles on a sled, so that does count for something.
Dude, I haven't done shit, man. I got on a sled and just
that's pretty sick.
It was badass, but it's nothing like what you guys are doing in a race. So
you should come up in April. We go on a little fun adventure after Iditarod, dude.
Do a little like go camp out with the dogs and take a couple sleds.
Chili vanilla, dude.
Chili vanilla.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. What's your thoughts on the combination of high mileage leading into that Iditarod, right? Plus those mushers that are known for kind of starting out hot. So like when we talk about mileage, we're talking about like obviously Brent's put mileage on, Ryan's been putting mileage on, like Jesse's been putting like these people don't stop. Mm-hmm. They don't have like an off season, right? So they've been putting miles on at some point that accumulates. Like I don't know, but like it clearly it works out too. Like
yeah.
So I don't know. What's your thoughts?
They have like they have the best chance of success doing that than a lower mileage team. I think, gosh, you go like I think of Riley Dyke. He ran, was it a couple years ago or a year ago, where he was talking with, dude, I had like my best training year I have ever had leading into a 1,000-mile event. And so he like kind of had a little bit more of an aggressive start for his team. Well, he started with some bigger runs and shorter rests and stuff. And he ended up seeing some like early signs of like that dehydration issues that are kind of hard to come. Like you kind of just have to drop your dog. Like you can't just like get through it. It's not. So you get these dehydration issues, and it's not something that they can just come back from in 12 hours. Right. So they have to just not run for a couple of days. And so, and get that water in their system, maybe an IV just to be safe. Right. So that's just one of those things where it's like, I don't even know how or why that happens. It's not necessarily just that they're not drinking water. It's that they're just stoked on Iditarod or whatever. And they're maybe just because they ran 4,000 miles of training doesn't mean that, oh, we're going to go do this 60 and rest 3 hours and do this 60 or whatever and rest 3 hours and 4 hours and do it again. Or I'm not saying that's exactly what Riley did. My point is just there's other variables when it comes to Iditarod. You got all these other teams. You got a varying trail. And just because your team's in great shape doesn't necessarily mean that you can pull these things off every time. You can't do it. You can't start out strong and stay strong every single year, or else we'd see the same teams win every single year. And, Brent has started off strong and not finished in first place every single Iditarod except for 2022. Not every single one, but like he's had aggressive starts in 2023 and 2021 and in 2020, and he won in 2022. All right. And then Ryan, dude, he's got like a long
Same thing.
history of starting out in
Yeah.
front, and he pulled it off in 2023. Dallas has a long history of not starting out in front, and he's won 5 times.
But he
but Dallas
also
is a
has the high
different
mileage
beast.
too.
He has the high mileage, but it's not. That's what I'm saying. Like, you start out in front, and it's just a smaller margin for error. Right? Some teams can pull it off some years, and it's not like you can't know that they're going to be able to pull it off at the start line. It's just an element of risk to it. And if you start off slower, that you're minimizing that risk. If you're like taking a little extra rest and there's little shorter runs, you're minimizing the risk. But you're also, on the other hand, minimizing your chance. If you're too conservative, you're minimizing your chance of being in front. So it's just a really tough line to follow, and I've never been a competitive musher. I so take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, I guess, but like, I think I have a pretty good idea of like,
I mean, dude, you worked with
that,
Dallas and Jeff King. Like, you have an idea of things, like, don't sell yourself short. That's for sure. All right. Well, we've rambled well.
Dude, don't apologize for us rambling, dude. I just spent 3 fucking days and nights like following this race. If I can talk about it for an hour, like, sorry, like, it's a fucking, I just spent literally fucking Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday doing this thing. So if I can sum it up into just 1 hour, like, sorry, it's like, whatever, dude. If we release a 2.5 hour podcast, then great, dude. That's 2.5 hours. You don't have to listen to it all in one thing. I want to give a shout out to the race organizer manager guy, Jason. Dude, he said he's been listening to us, and he was saying this hilarious story of like Laura's episode, because Laura said something about how like the sourdough checkpoint doesn't have water. And he's like, why can't you guys just, have like a barrel of water or whatever going? And then at the start of the race, so Jason told me this. He's like, dude, I think at the start of the race, I'm gonna make a specific Laura rule that everybody has access to water except for Laura at all the checkpoints. And I thought that was hilarious. And it was really cool that he was listening. And he's from North Carolina. And because I was like, I saw him and I was like, dude, I remember him, but I thought, maybe he doesn't remember me. I was like, hey, man, I'm Sean. He's like, oh, I know who you are, man. I've been listening to every episode of your podcast.
Awesome, man.
The guy that runs the Copper Basin. So it's really cool. He's a pastor of the church there. And so now every time I cuss, I'm like thinking of him. I'm like, I got to say, all right, maybe I shouldn't drop F-bombs all the time. But, it is our podcast too. So we can say an F-bomb, but like, my bad, Jason, but it was really cool chatting with him. And I think he might also be a good person to get on the podcast, having organized the Copper Basin for so many years and being from the dirty South like you and me. I think we got a lot to talk about.
Let's go. Dirty South, dirty. Can you feel me? Wow, that just happened. That just naturally happened. I don't know what just happened. I'm blacking out right now.
Yeah, that was embarrassing. It's okay.
No, it's not. Well, do we want to talk? Do we want to give a little preview of our guest for this episode? Is there anything else you want to talk about before we move on?
Yeah, obviously, in general, we'll just touch on the fact that next weekend is Cusco, which is super exciting. Right? Is it next weekend? I think it is.
It's not like, so we're recording this on a Thursday. It'll be released on a Friday, and then not
the following weekend.
Yeah, the following. Right. Yep.
This would be typically the Willow 300 weekend, I think. So, but Cusco's coming out in 10 days, 9 days, 8 days.
9 days.
And So we're excited about that. That's a really
Oh man,
exciting January, man. Really
it's
fun.
been fun, man.
That's a
And
great month. Oh, it was my birthday out there. It was fun to do. They all sang me happy birthday at the orientation or whatever. I got it. Oh my God. All right. That reminds me. So Cynthia and Natalie Wolf
okay,
are listeners of the podcast.
all right. Shout
And
out.
and they called Lake Louise Lodge and paid for a $40 tab for me for my birthday.
Wow.
And
Oh,
I
that's so
got
nice.
hash browns and eggs and toast. Then I like went out and helped the team get parked and shot the shit with Sean, and then came back in and got some pancakes, got another couple cups of coffee, went back out, got Matt's team in, came back in and got a beer. I was like living the dream out there. It was awesome. So thank you guys. I think it was Cynthia and Natalie Wolf. I don't know. They might not share the same last name, but certainly it's a Cynthia and a Natalie, and one of their last names is Wolf. You should shoot us a message on Instagram or on Facebook or email us. And I'd love to at least talk to you guys. And that is, there we go. So that's that. Matt
So
McAllister. Oh yeah, we got to talk about this.
yeah, so I just pulled up for anyone who's not watching on YouTube. I just pulled up those of you who entered our fantasymushing.com pack is what they call it. I would say a group or our league or whatever, but they call it a pack. So shout out, we had 12, I believe 12 different people, and we like literally put this out with like minimal time for you all to sign up. So
Yeah, that's our bad.
that's our bad, but also like we expect to see this grow. So we got the Cusco coming up, and feel free to hop in.
Next
And
Friday the 26th, I believe, is when the Cusco starts. Friday night.
Friday the 26th. So yeah, Matt McAllister, just real quickly want to pull up his winning squad here. We got
Pretty sturdy squad.
dude. I mean, he went 1 through 16. That's what won him. He got 1, 2, 6,
Six
12, 13, 14, 16. So he had Brent Sass,
monster.
Jesse Holmes, Nick Petit, Christy Barrington, Elk. Is it Elk or Elky?
Elkie.
Elky
I
Hall,
learned that. Yep. Matt Hall's wife.
Samantha Lalonde, and
That was
Trevin
her
Hunter.
first, by the way, her first 300-mile race. Finishes 13th, wins Veterinarian's Choice Award for best dog
Ooh.
care. So Elkie is learning. She's already learned how to be a good musher, it seems. Got a great group of dogs, great mentor, great husband, it sounds like. So congratulations to Elkie, and congratulations to Matt McAllister
Yeah.
for winning the league.
And whoever Faith is, I'm sorry that you got second place, but I got to just, call it out, So you're close. You're like only 38 points away. Dude, I'm ticked off, man. I had 2, 4, 5, 10, 15. I had a solid squad, man.
Damn, that is a good squad.
Jesse, Paige, shout out to Paige. I told you, Paige, I picked you. Anyways.
Nice.
Anyways, we won't get too lost in that. But moving on, our guest, we had Robert Forto on for you all. And Robert reached out to us, and he's doing the same thing we're doing, right? We are trying to spread the word on mushing. We're trying to bring these people to your homes, learn about the races, what they did, what they learned, all of that. And so we just feel like it's kind of good to cross connect, and I think we're going to be on his podcast. And Sean, what do you have to say?
Oh yeah, I didn't really, I'd heard Robert and I are friends on Facebook. I didn't really know what he's been doing, and so we kind of went in a little bit dark on things. I tried to do a little bit of research, but he bought Mushing Magazine with his wife, and he's doing some incredible things for mushing. I think the most exciting thing I heard about is that he's got 3,500 pounds of magazine from Mushing Magazine that he got from Gnome, from the previous owners of the magazine. And in their plan is to digitize that all. And then, like, you can use now you got all these things with like AI or whatever. You could probably just type in keywords of 1983 Iditarod and Susan Butcher or whatever, and come up with, you're going to get a lot of cool stories. It's really hard in Alaska in general to get like history of a specific nature of all the different little areas that have, it's a huge state. That's just in Alaska. The mushing history is also really hard to come by. And so this is a really huge resource that they're going to be adding to the internet. And then we're going to have hopefully lots of fans of certain mushers in certain years or whatever, looking up this stuff and coming up with some great knowledge. He's been releasing a freaking podcast episode every single week since 2009. Dude, I mean, I haven't done anything every single week.
We don't have shit on that. We are, wow, is all I have to say. Yeah.
So
it was impressive. It was really nice to get to know him, and he's also got the website mushing.com. So that's something that he's like going to continue.
Mushing.com. How'd you pull that off? Mushing.com. Dude, I think Hunter Keefe has hunterkeefe.com. And now Robert's got mushing.com. It's like next thing you're going to have like sleddog.com.
Next thing is we need mushingalaska.com.
No, okay. That sounds like so much work. I don't want to do that.
But anyways, but yeah, no, it was great to connect with him. He's a great resource. If there is something that you don't feel like we do well, I'm sure that he has other forms of covering mushing that maybe are like another way to digest things, if you will. They've got articles, they don't have the video for podcasts. It's all audio, but I mean, audio is so much easier, so I don't blame him. And then the other thing that really stood out to me about this episode was, I just would love to do this, is that he teaches a class at University of Alaska and another university as well.
APU.
A mushing class. Like, you literally learn how to mush. You learn, like, I just was super interested in that because, being the guy in this that hasn't really done it but is super interested in it, like, I'm like, oh man, that would be kind of cool to do. So he's got his hand in a lot of different things, and he's clearly in love with mushing, and he's been heavily involved with it for years. And so a little bit different than our normal guests in terms of having, like an Iditarod person on or anything like that. But it was super interesting to chat with him, and I think that you guys will enjoy that. So the only other thing left to say, I'll ask you, Sean, before I end with what I want to say, if you've got anything.
Do I have anything?
I don't think so. No. I was just, before I end, I wanted to make sure I give you.
Dude, I have so many things. It's crazy.
Oh, God. All right. Well, on that note, y'all, next week with our next episode release, we're going to have some kind of bigger announcements to make about the huge breaking
massive
news.
Announcements.
But we're gonna kind of make some more announcements on some stuff we're doing for the Iditarod coming up. So just thought I would just drop that in there for you.
Oh yeah, big announcements.
And other than that, y'all enjoy. Thank you for listening. And alrighty, folks.
Toodaloo.
Alrighty, folks. Welcome back to the Mushing Alaska podcast. And we're up now with our next guest, Mr. Robert Forto from First Paw Media and the Mushing Alaska magazine. And Mushing Mag, excuse me.
Yeah, that's okay.
Welcome on, sir. How's it going today?
It is going well. It's a pleasure to be on, and thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So one thing that Sean and I have kind of talked about is when Sean was started getting into the mushing scene, there's not a lot of like easily accessible information on races necessarily or mushers. Maybe you have to like find the right thing on Facebook or something like that. And so Sean and I don't know, we've always kind of like chatted about what's going on in the scene. We're like, well, what if we like started our own podcast or did something? And I think, you know, similar to what you're doing, we're just kind of trying to spread the word on the mushing scene. And so thought it would be a great idea to have you on and just kind of talk to you a little bit about what you've got going on your end. And just I know you recently got the magazine, so kind of curious to hear a little bit about what's on the horizon with that and whatnot.
Sounds good. Yeah, I appreciate being on your show. I guess you guys started what, a couple of years ago, and it was always cool to see another podcast come on the scene. We've been doing our dog training podcast since 2009. We started our mushing podcast in 2010. Way back then, it was called Mush You Huskies, and we were hosting it on a radio channel here in Palmer. And it was cool to be able to go into a radio studio with all their fancy equipment and all that stuff and just jump on and sort of learn from, the grizzled veterans, if you will, on how to podcast and how to do radio. And we had some pretty exciting times. We used to host live on our nightly Iditarod coverage back in the day. And I remember the only live finish we ever had on the radio was there at the studio. My buddy Alex and I were there, and it was cool. I think it was Dallas's first win, and what a cool moment to capture that on the radio. And folks driving down the road could hear that. It was almost like breaking news at the time. And I thought that was pretty cool.
That's
Nice.
awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that you got to do that, and I didn't know you were right there, just a hop and a skip away from me here in Anchorage. That's that's pretty awesome. So are you at this point? You're not do you have like Iditarod, ideas for what you're gonna be doing to cover this year?
Every year it changes a little bit. I've had a couple of different co-hosts over the year. My buddy Alex and I did it for 5 or 6 years, and then the last couple of years, a friend of mine, Tony Ryder, did it, and that always works out well. But it's a huge time commitment, as you guys know, with doing a podcast, especially a nightly podcast, when you're on for a couple hours a day, and with deadlines, and you got to do the research and the stories and all that. It can take a lot of time to do that. So I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do this year. Of course, we have a couple of months, nothing like burning the midnight oil, if you will. We did change the name a little bit. We call our nightly podcast the Burled Arch. We just launched that pretty much the same time we launched Mushing, the Mushing Magazine revamp and all of that. So we're excited to do that and just rebranding a little bit. And I think it'll be a fun way to go.
That's awesome. That's a pretty, yeah. I like did a light research on like you and Michelle and what you guys have done over. I mean, you guys have had all kinds of different, eggs in different baskets, all kind of seeming to all have to do with working dogs, all throughout the country. You guys seem a little bit more involved than me in like sprint mushing and lower 48 scene as well. And dog training was something that I get a lot of questions about training dogs from just my friends. And, I can't get my dog to stop doing this, or I wish my dog could do that. And so now I'm going to send them your way to some of those dog training podcast episodes.
Hey, I appreciate the referral for sure.
Yeah, it's there's a lot, just because it's working dogs that, the Alaskan Huskies. I mean, there's a lot of similar psychology, even if you're dealing with a little, Chihuahua or an Alaskan Husky. Obviously, there's differences, but there's a lot that you can use.
For sure.
So, Robert, I'm curious. clearly you've been involved in spreading the word about dogs for the better part of 15 years now at least. So kind of tell us a little bit about like that foundation. Where's your love from dogs begin?
Well, I got my first Siberian Husky way back in 1987, and I was the guy in the obedience and show ring as a late teenager, if you will. And I was in there with the little old ladies, and I literally got ran out of the ring because here I was with some scruffy Siberians, and I did not look the part of a dog show competitor. But that's where I got my start. Went to college in Portland, Oregon in the early 90s, hoping to become a veterinarian. Jumped into the sled dog scene in 1994 when I moved to Minnesota, doing some mid-distance sprint races, that sort of thing. And then we moved up here to Alaska in 2010 to chase that elusive Iditarod dream. And as you know, Sean, it takes a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort to be able to do that. And I always say that, hey, I'm not going to be the oldest rookie, so I have a couple of years left before I can do it. So I think the oldest one was in his 70s. So I got a couple of decades before I'll be the oldest rookie.
Nice. All right. Yeah, dream big, man.
Yep.
Norman Vaughn ran the Iditarod 10 times since he turned 70.
There you go.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. So yeah, you what's some of the mid distance? You said you did mid distance race?
Yeah, we've done pretty much everything imaginable down there. We ran the Bear Grease one time, and that did not go well. I didn't know what I was doing. We did, I can't think of all of them over the years, but yeah, we've definitely been busy. Up here in Alaska, we've done the Knik 200, the Tustamina 200, the Don Bowers, when that was still around. And of course, a lot of the local, Chugiak races and Montana Creek and all those. Just anything I could get my hands in, I guess.
Heck yeah. Yeah, it's been fun. My buddy Matt Pavelio, he's running the Copper Basin this weekend.
Yep.
He's been spending some time training dogs there in the Chugiak trail system, and I've learned a little bit about that zone over there, that there's some pretty awesome trails. Not a ton of miles, but enough to get your team kind of moving or in the early part of training. And it seems like I kind of want to go check out those trails with some dogs. It sounds like a good place to go.
It's interesting you say that, Sean. We did a podcast with my buddy KP called The Dog Driver a few years ago, and we were interviewing sprint mushers all over the world. And they would all say that those Chugiak trails are the nicest trails in the world. And, I've been on a lot of mushing trails before, but for people to say that in Sweden and Norway and Switzerland and France and all that, for them to say that about local trails is really something. They are absolutely beautiful, and they spend a lot of time grooming them and taking care of them. And, for folks that are listening outside of Alaska, that's literally just like 15 miles or so from our largest city in the state, where some of the best trails ever are right there.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Dude, Brennan, the biggest difference, like, I don't know, I grew up when I was in mushing, in my early years, which were, I guess I've only really mushed for like 5 years, but I'm around it. And I didn't really understand what you mean, like groomed trail. It was just a snow machine wide trail, and we'd drag like a piece of chain link fence behind it, maybe to try to, or a tire, and then you get to these trails that are in like Big Lake and Chugiak that I don't know how, involved the grooming is. And obviously it's pretty good. I'm assuming there's corduroy at some point, in some days, and these trails can, what a difference, you're sitting there on the ungroomed trails. It's like bang, bang, the sled on top of the moguls. And it's, I just thought that was just what mushing was. And then I get on a groomed trail and I was like, oh, this is so much faster and comfortable and nice. And I'm okay, maybe it is worth all that work putting in trails and using those groomers.
Of course. We live up here in Willow on the east side of the Parks Highway, and pretty much our trail system is not used by very many people at all. Vern Halter he's my neighbor, lives right down the
Oh,
street.
nice.
Taylor, Ramey Smith, those are really the only people that ever use our trails. So we have literally hundreds of miles of trails over here that nobody uses because everybody lives on the other side, on the west side that connects
Right.
to the Iditarod Trail and the Willow Community Center and all that. And yeah, we don't have groomed trails over here. Of course, we drag them, like you said, with the a piece of chain link or Matt. He hooks up his dog team to a drag and pulls it around. But yeah, it's a big difference from between bringing on those really fancy trails like Chugiak compared to what we have over here.
Yeah. And I was curious, how are you still like getting on a sled, or is that like here and there? Do you keep some dogs or what?
When we can, we do it. We have 35 dogs down in the yard. We spend a lot of our time in the winter. I teach college class over at UAA and APU. We teach dog mushing over there. So that is a 2-credit course at APU and a 1-credit course over at UAA. So we spend a good part of our winter teaching college kids, which I think is really cool. I'm blessed to have that opportunity. Not very many people are able to do that. And introducing 2 classes full of people that have never seen a sled dog before, never been on a sled. And by the time they're done, it's an experience of their life that they'll never forget. And I really enjoy that. And our class is starting, I think, in 2 weeks or so. I guess, what are we at? Mid-January almost already.
Yeah, I've had a lot of friends mention this to me over the last few years. Like, yeah, Sean, you do mushing? I did it. I'm like, yeah. Oh yeah, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I took a mushing class and we went to the kennel and I was like, huh, you guys have a mushing class in college? Yeah. Like that is such an Alaska thing. That's ridiculous. You got a mushing class. That's so cool, man. It's a really good. I think a lot carries over from mushing into real life, and that's awesome that you're going to be doing that again this winter.
Oh yeah, we teach a lot of outdoor leadership skills, and that's sort of my career path, if you will, in the real world is teaching leadership and that sort of stuff. And we try to incorporate how a sled dog team can relate to business or team building and that sort of stuff. And when you have young kids, I'm in my early 50s. When you have 20-year-olds that are just jumping into the real world, they need to have some skills that transfer over. And I think that's an important part of it. And if you can do it while you're mushing dogs, what better than to get out there and show people Alaska for sure.
And so let me ask more about this class. I'm super intrigued.
You should sign up, dude.
Right? Like, let me just come to Alaska for a semester.
I think it is full for this year, but we teach it every year, so you can always jump in. And I think the one at UAA, which is shorter than the APU course, it's only 1 credit. So whatever a college credit costs, $300 or something like that, you get to come out here and do what you got to do. And we're not a tour. We don't put them in the bag and let them run around the trails. We teach them how to drive a dog team and undo tangles and put on booties, and if we have to break up fights or whatever happens, how mushing goes. You never know what's happening.
So class is in the kennel.
Oh yeah. We do a class.
Like, you don't have do you have class in like a classroom at all, or like the classroom is the kennel?
Yeah, we do a class where we're doing kind of introduction, show them the sled and what the brake is and all of that sort of stuff, what gear to wear and all that to prepare them. Then on that particular class, they come over for 3 days. So they come over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, all day here at the kennel. And, we're just running around the trails. Like I said, tons and tons of trails over here. And then we do sort of a recap class on Monday, and we give them a little test, if you will, so it can at least be a college class. So we have to do a little homework, if you know what I mean. And they get a college credit that they can use and hopefully have something to talk about for years to come.
I love it.
Awesome.
I love it.
Heck yeah. So let's see. I I think one of the things I was most excited to have you on, and that you reached out and were appreciative of that. I've seen. I was like, who's Robert Forto for like 3 or 4 years? It's Robert Forto guy. He's got, you've been doing this for about as long as I've been around on the planet, and I've seen you've had mushers like Boozer and maybe Brent Sass and like people big names in the mushing game, and I think the most important thing that we're all doing, both here at Mushing Alaska and you with Mushing Magazine, and all those years you've been, sharing dogs with people all over the world, is just promoting, sled dogs and the mushing lifestyle, and getting as many people as possible to learn about it, see all the amazing stories about the dogs and the people that are involved with it, and the relationships between all the different species. And and that we're all in it for that, and that there's you already have this amazing following with your podcast, and Mushing Magazine's got a bunch of people reading. We're just coming up, we're trying to figure it out. We're a little bit more in the earlier developmental stages, but there's room for all of us. And Iditarod Insider is an incredible source of being able to follow the race. Brennan and I are sitting in our living room talking our 2 cents about things, and I just think it's all good for all of us to have this network that we could continue to feed into. And I mean, I got to go to the Connect 200 this weekend. It was just like so fun to see all those people, and some of them I hadn't seen in a few years. I saw, my friend Severin Catherine. I hadn't seen him since like in 6 years. And so it's good to catch up with people, and it's just like got me really excited about this thing we got up here in Alaska, and these amazing group of people. And so it's cool to bridge the gap between you and I, to have you on here, and that we just have a lot of those common interests. So just, thanks, man. I really appreciate all the things that you've been doing.
Hey,
in the mushing scene.
Likewise, for sure. And like you said, there is plenty of wealth to spread around. And, we've interviewed pretty much everybody in the last 10 years or so. And I really like seeing how, I've been in the podcasting game for a long time, not just on mushing and dog training, but kind of an early adopter, if you will, of podcasting. And I think that the more shows that are out there that are able to spread the information, the better, on whatever topic you're talking about. Just imagine all of there are hundreds of podcasts that talk about one TV show, whatever that is, and
right.
Everybody has their spin on it. And I don't see it as competition. The way I see it is, if you and I interview the same person, and even in the same week, your approach is going to be entirely different than mine. I'm going to ask different questions. They're going to tell different stories, unless it's a really canned interview, like a Hollywood type interview where they're just saying the same thing every night on Jimmy Kimmel or Jimmy Fallon or anything like that. The way that we ask questions is what makes podcasting unique. And you guys have a little bit different spin than I do. Obviously, you're much younger than I am, so you have a different audience than we do, I think. Our audience tends to be a little bit older, tends to be more women. That's just sort of where people are attracted to what we listen to. But you guys are doing some cool things. I saw you were doing some live stuff and stories and stuff with the Connect 200 this year. I would have loved to have been there. When we think about Cale Casey and what he does, and
oh man,
people that follow that guy, all he does is pretty much walk around with his iPhone and smiles to the camera every now and then, but he's got an amazing following. He's got energy like you wouldn't believe. And that's what this sport needs. It needs more positive interaction, positive storytelling, more people to learn about it than what they're just reading about on the internet. And, obviously people go down rabbit holes, good, bad, or indifferent. And I think the more that we promote these stories and these interviews and this lifestyle, the better for all of us.
Absolutely. And I'm assuming that you were, Yeah, you saw some of that footage of the Connect 200 this weekend. What'd you think about it?
Oh yeah.
About the event?
Hey, I don't know what's going on with that young girl from Nenana. We had her on a couple of years ago, I think right after she won either the junior Iditarod or the Willow 100. And I remember having her and her little brother on the podcast. And it's always cool to talk to kids. If you guys haven't done a lot of junior musher interviews, those are the ones to have. They got a very interesting perspective. But I tell you what, that girl, she's blazing trail. I don't know what's going to happen in the next few years, but when she starts beating Iditarod champions and top 5 finishers, that's something to be said. I don't know what kind of training game they got going on over there, or what dogs they have, but they're doing something good.
Yes, they certainly are. I believe she's got some king dogs, and I can't remember what the other source is, but yeah, I mean, I'm part of me wants to say she might just be training better than better than other people are. Like, and that's great. She's got an awesome family of her. Like you said, you got her brother, her dad is they're both insanely accomplished in the outdoors, and you just can tell they're just driven. And I'm not, that's a it's a big thing to say. Obviously, they're not training for 1,000-mile sled dog race, but I think it's not like they just have their dogs are just like the best dogs. It's they're great dogs, but so are Brent's, and so is Ryan Reddington's dogs, and so are Travis Beals and Amanda Otto's. But
what I
guys
think
are
what I think about what they're doing is they're doing it on their own. They're not, and there's nothing wrong with this, but they're not leasing a team from an Iditarod champion or something like that and coming up and jumping on the runners for a junior Iditarod or whatever and just doing it that way. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you put all of that time and effort, as you know, Sean, all those hours of training and all of that goes into that, if she's able to do that and be a teenager, all that takes, whether you're at homeschooled or not, but you know how teenagers are. You don't want to do something for hours and hours if you got other things to do, whether it be social media or video games or talking with your friends or whatever. It takes a huge commitment, and I think that family's really doing it well.
Yeah, I mean, the resume of her. I mean, she trained her dogs to win the junior Iditarod, to win the Willow 100, to win the Ace race. All those are just the events, but then there's all the training that led up to those little, not so little accolades all along the way, consistently for the last 3-4 years. If you just look at that and you're like, all right, well, like, this isn't that surprising, but it is, because it's 16-year-old girl beats Iditarod champion. That's the headline. Yep. And it is an underdog story, and it is she literally was behind Brent for the 199 miles, and then
passed
mile 200.
Yeah.
That was fun. I was like standing on the Knik Lake, and you could see it was like they're coming any second or whatever, and I had my crappy half-assed attempt at Kel Casey live, and and you see, I was like, all right, here he comes. And then I was like, wait a second, here she comes. And and then there's that amazing video that I think is gone completely viral. I think it has like 100,000+ views or whatever. Seeing the moment right before Emily is gonna pass Brent, and Brent's like, son of a bitch. It's hilarious. And Brent's just like, what a class act. He's just super impressed by Emily, and he was, he's like happy that she was the one to pass him, and like, you can't push a rope. She just had a faster dogs there at the end.
For sure.
Yeah, I have to say, like, Sean and I were talking before the Knik, and we were talking about like writing down like our top 10, just like names. And I feel like she would have been in my top 10, but like when you look at the names that were at the race, like she was in front of all of them. that to me is absurd. And she's rocking some crazy momentum right now. I mean, obviously, it helps that she's not going to be doing any races that are much longer. I don't know the rest of her if she has. I mean, I know she's doing the junior Iditarod.
This is definitely her big race of the season, but there are, the junior Iditarod and maybe one other event. But yeah, I mean, there's this, it doesn't need to be downplay. This is a huge deal. And, I just can't imagine it's going to go in any direction, but in the direction of success moving forward for her and the Robinson family.
Well, one thing with that, we've talked a lot about it on our show, is there truly has been a little bit of a changing of the guard in Iditarod in particular. We're seeing, obviously, us that we follow the race, we know who they are, but fans, they have never heard of a lot of these names before, especially if they're from outside of Alaska. And when we see those folks, just like in the last couple of years with Hunter Keefe and Eddie Burke and those type of guys really doing very well, and that's key to the future of the sport, is having guys like that. I mean, guys like Martin Buser and Jeff King and Mitch Seavey and all of those guys. They've been around literally since I've been alive, and definitely since you guys have. And those are the household names. It's interesting to see the new guys really popping up for sure.
Yeah, and that's and to see 39 mushers in the Knik. There's a pretty big field in the Copper Basin.
38, I believe.
A huge field in the Cusco. Seeing bigger numbers in the Quest. All these big races up here. These are, to me, this is my familiarity is with these events. There's lots of mushing happening all over the earth. There's internationally in both hemispheres but yeah, it's cool to see these mid-distance races, seeing these people showing up for these events, training for them and getting their dogs around the track, and a lot of like happy tails of wagon dog teams. I was there watching the back of the pack coming in at 2 a.m. Monday. I saw Isaac Tieford and maybe Weemark coming in. Their dogs were like rolling around in the snow. Like it was just an easy. They made it easy for their dogs who had never done anything like that, and set them up for a good rest of their mushing season, and for the rest of those dogs' lives, having that positive experience is going to trickle over not just into March, but into 2025 as well, and on. And that's only. It's just good to see kind of a revival, when we've seen the Iditarod numbers kind of go down from, back in 2009 when you started your podcast, Robert, and there's almost 100 mushers in the Iditarod, and now it's in the 30s, and now we're getting back up into the 40s again. You're seeing all these mid-distance races fill up. I think that's gonna, all these people you're seeing that are new names this year, you're gonna see in the Iditarod maybe in 2 years or next year or 3 years or whatever. And so it's just really cool to see this progression and see this new generation coming in, and new generation coming in or not, there's still Pete Kaiser and Dallas Seavey and the household names that are they're in their 30s.
Of
Brendan,
course,
you and I know being in your 30s is in your prime still, right, Brendan?
Still in our prime. Now I don't know how I'm feeling if I'm in my prime right now, but numbers wise, it's in.
Hey, you still got 35 sled dogs, so you must be moving around,
doing something right. Yeah. So I'm sitting over here and I'm just kind of like thinking about this year's Iditarod in my head, and one thing Sean and I enjoy doing is chatting. That's why we're doing this in the first place. And no better of a person to ask than someone else who does what we do. What are some of your favorite or your top storylines going into this year's Iditarod?
This year, I think it's going to be the snow, especially here in South Central. We have 8 feet right here in Willow right now. It's a little bit different year than in previous years. So I think that's going to be one storyline. Second is like Sean said, that smaller field like we've had in the last few years. And I believe Dallas coming back will be an interesting story. He took a couple of years off. It sounds like football almost, where they say, "Oh, I'm going to retire," and then they come back in a year or two and just beat the snot out of everybody. And it sounds like Tom Brady. We compare Tom Brady and Dallas Seavey all the time during our Iditarod coverage about, it's almost the same storyline. So that's interesting as well. And like you said, all of those newcomers that are coming in are interesting parts of it. And I'm just excited every year to cover that and some of the things that we have planned with Mushing Magazine and what we want to do with that. And I think it's going to be really exciting.
Nice. Yeah, Sean and I are always like, all right, who do you think's going to win this year? And the last few years where Dallas hasn't been in it, it's been a little bit like, okay, this conversation, like, oh, Sean and I are not on the same page. When if Dallas is in it, it's hard not to say his name, obviously.
Yep.
So it'll be. I'm interested to see
Copper Basin.
I was about to say, I'm interested to see how he does, but I think even though he hasn't done this race before, I still think he's gonna apply his Iditarod like mentality to the race. Cause like in the past, and I'm not the guy to recall the right things here, so you guys help me out with this, but I feel like when he has done those mid-distance races in the past, he's never really gone out to try to win them. He's just kind of like using it as a training session leading up to the Iditarod.
Yep. I agree with you. I did not know he was running in the Copper Basin, so that'll be interesting to watch. But yeah, I think we heard that same story. I think from Nick a couple of years ago. He says, "Oh, I'm just going to use this as a training run," and he just went out. I think it was either the Copper Basin or the Connect 200 or Willow 300 or one of those, and he just blew everybody away. I don't recall which race it was, and he led up to it. Oh, it's just going to be a training run. It's going to be a race, whatever. and
I heard that this weekend too with the Connect. Yeah. A lot of people saying that, like, yeah, this is my like C or D team. Like, we'll probably just take it easy, and then they're like, top 5. They're like, all right.
I think that was what Ryan was saying. Ryan was saying, "Oh, I'm going to run a puppy team," and what did he? I don't have the stats.
Oh, he did say that. Okay, I was like, I was wondering if that was said in front of a camera or not. But yeah, that's what I had heard.
First into the halfway point or whatever, Deschka landing over here. I think he was first or somewhere around there.
Yeah, he was.
With that puppy team, and you can't
he didn't have his puppy team.
It wasn't all puppies.
Like, he had like 2 Iditarod champion dogs at least, or maybe 3 on that team.
Yeah.
So I think it's just I think he's just having fun, like just like, oh yeah, let's see if these people maybe I can fly under the radar, which is impossible to do.
But bring back to the Copper Basin, that used to be kind of the premier race here in Alaska for a long time. And, it was one that was followed religiously by all the fans. But now I think a lot of momentum is really shifting over to the Cusco. And they do that because, man, those guys put on such a great race. Of course, it's a huge purse. They got great support from the local community. I mean, they do fireworks and drone coverage, and they're doing it all. If other races, I remember saying this on our Iditarod coverage last year, if other races just took what they were doing and the way that they cover a race, I think that these races would be much bigger than they are from a fan's perspective. Just by having that type of coverage, because races like the Copper Basin, it's literally in the middle of nowhere. And that's spotty, and it's tough to get out there to watch it. I mean, you got to drive, what is it, 4 or 5 hours from Anchorage just to go to the start, and then you stand there as a fan anyway. You stand there for a couple hours, and you got to drive home. It's not like Iditarod where you can make a day out of it. You're driving up there middle of nowhere, potentially in 40 below zero. Then you watch a few teams run by, then you got to get in the truck and go home. So I think the Cusco is doing great things. Of course, the Iditarod is doing very well with what they do. I'm interested to see what happens with the Quest in the next few years, if they're going to get back on track with the 1,000 mile race. I think that was an interesting story from the mushing community's perspective on how things went down that way. And then, of course, all of the other races in the lower 48. I know you guys really concentrate with Alaska, but the Bear Grease being canceled because of no snow this year, that's a huge qualifying race down in the lower 48. It's sort of the Cusco of the lower 48 in terms of coverage with all their fancy social media and all that they do. So it'll be interesting to see where the next couple of years really takes the sport from a fan's perspective. I think from a mushing's perspective, it's going to be the same as it's always been. People are still going to sign up. People are still going to run. There's still going to be competition. There's still going to be puppy teams run by, the champions, and, they're going to say it's conservative or whatever, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few years.
Yeah, that's a really good point. The fans' perspective, that's something that can change a lot and for the better. And yeah, you're not going to see mushing is just such a high barrier to entry, whether it's financially or commitment of time, so there's always going to be, at the, we've seen probably what was the highest of mushing as participants, because it was so much cheaper to come up to Alaska, buy 5 acres, build a little crappy cabin, and start mushing dogs. And now all those properties are 5 times more expensive, and food is 5 times more expensive for your dogs, right? So you can only see the actual mushing participants grow so much. Where the fans, though, now we got, we can call Elon Musk and he can give us Starlink as a sponsorship for Mushing Alaska.
Right, yes.
But I'm going out to Copper Basin, and I'm like, it was fun at Nick. I had all the stories of the teams coming and going or whatever. And now it's like, all right, I'm not.
Hey, the Starlink it maybe is the ticket. I know that they were that on the Kotzebue. What's that race called?
Kobuk.
Kobuk 440. I know that they used that pretty heavily last year. That's in the middle of nowhere with no trees, so you don't have anything to worry about for coverage or anything like that. And if races like that can really utilize that type of technology, from a podcaster or a video podcast or KL Casey type stuff, we need internet to be able to do what we do. And It's like the old days where you're writing newspaper stories and then they get reported on weeks later. It's this, people want instantaneous stuff now, whether it be trackers or stats or whatever. So yeah, I like what you guys are doing. You're bringing that fresh perspective of it, and keep it up. What have you guys been doing this 2 or 3 years now?
Not even.
Yeah. This is so this, I want to say at the end of November was our first full year of doing this together. Now, Sean was doing a podcast before I got involved. That was just a solo podcast.
Okay.
So that was a little bit before, you probably did that for like a year or so, kind of on or off.
It's somewhat seasonal. And this is why, Brennan, you're here, because I was on and off with my podcast. And then, when I start, it's tough to like keep it going consistently. Consistency is the hardest thing for me.
That is, I commented on one of the Facebook pages today, one of the podcast Facebook pages, and they said that pod fade, if you know what that is, that's where people host for a while, then it fades out for one reason or another. And I was talking to this guy, and he says, "What do you do to keep going?" And I commented, I said, "We've been doing this since the late January of 2009, and we've never missed a week in all of those weeks." Now, we've obviously pre-recorded stuff if we're out of town or on vacation or whatever. We pre-record shows, but yeah, the struggle's real, guys. You know it. You know what it takes to sit down in front of this mic every week and have either an interview or a story or whatever you're doing where it can go on week after week after week. And as interesting as our information is, if people aren't listening, there's no reason to do it. I'm sure you guys would agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like hearing my voice a little bit, but not that much. Yeah, I don't know. I think the hardest thing for me is like, I'm not always, I think I'm not, there's some people that just feel social all the time. And I might come across as a guy that is fairly outgoing and extroverted and social, but like sometimes I just don't want to like talk at all to anyone, whether there's a microphone or not, And so and sometimes my brain's foggy for one reason or another. And I just feel like I'm making just the most incoherent group of words like I am right now. I don't know how to end this sentence.
That's
So it's
okay.
like,
That's okay. I reached out to you guys a couple of weeks ago. It was right around Christmas. It was right after our launch of the takeover of Mushing Magazine. And I thought it would be cool to spread the word a little bit to your fans. Of course, a lot of our fans are your fans. And I would love to talk a little bit about what we're doing over there and what's happening with Mushing Magazine. Do you mind if we jump into
yeah,
that?
absolutely.
Please.
So anybody that's been involved with the sport has probably picked up an issue or two of Mushing Magazine over the years. It started in late 1987, 1988 or so as really the only magazine for our sport. And back then, that was it. That's where we got our stories because internet obviously was not where it is today. And it was published pretty much religiously for all of that time. And then over the years, of course, with social media and podcasting and videos and YouTube and all that, magazines sort of went out of flavor. I bet you guys don't have a stack of new magazines laying around on your coffee table like folks my age do. But we got an opportunity from Diana and Nils. They live up in Nome, and they're the publishers of the Nome Nugget, the oldest newspaper in Alaska. And they were doing Mushing Magazine for the last few years, and really just to keep the history alive. They wanted to make sure that the story got told in the print form. Obviously, they're newspaper guys. So they reached out to us, and I think you guys will appreciate this from a podcasting perspective, is I had known those guys for a long time. I'd never met them personally. And we flew up to Nome to sit down and talk about the purchase of Mushing. And I said, why did you contact us out of all the people that could have took this magazine over? And Nils said, I have listened to every podcast episode you've ever done. And you were the only person that we thought of when we thought about selling this magazine. So I said, man, that's a pretty cool perspective and a pretty cool honor to have that. So, of course, we made the deal. We flew home with 3,500 pounds of magazines that are in a storage unit, and we relaunched mushing.com. Not a lot had been done with that over the years. It was sort of like a sister site to the print magazine. So we're really revamping that, really podcast heavy. Obviously, that's where my niche is. And we're launching stuff every day with that. A whole bunch of new things coming out with contributors and photographers and all sorts of ways where people can get involved. And I think if people do write stories or take photos, whether it's our fans or your fans or whatever, and you want to earn a little bit of money by writing for something that you really love doing, hey, we have the opportunity to tell those stories, whether it be written or video or audio or whatever. So we're doing that, and we're going to keep up the print side of the magazine. That's very important to us because, there are people still here in Alaska that cannot listen to podcasts or watch YouTube. They still get their news from the newspaper and magazines and stuff. So we want to make sure that we still tell those stories as well. And I would bet, Sean, that you're probably in one of those older issues. What year did you run Iditarod?
Oh, you're
20 and 21.
20 and 21. So yeah, I'm going to look through our older issues and pull those up. And when we do, we'll definitely tag you in those and share those stories for sure. Because I'm sure you were. I haven't read through all of them, obviously, but
Right.
we're what we're planning on doing is digitizing all of those old issues and putting them on the website so people can subscribe and go in and read those old stories. Can you imagine all of the history that's out there from those late 80, early 90 Iditarods?
Oh,
when
man.
that's we're talking about? That was the highlight of our sport. And I think it was you, Sean, that said that we've probably crested. And we maybe have. And I think that was in the early 2000s. And a lot of that had to do with what you're talking about with the cheapness of land, and it was cheaper to enter, and dog food and all that. But I think the key component to that was the sponsors. I mean, back then they had Cabela's and Coca-Cola and Budweiser or whoever. They had all the big names, and of course, a lot of that's fallen by the wayside for one reason or another. But man, if we could get that back, I think that our sport would really flourish, and maybe somebody like the Robinsons, who have that story, could really attract somebody that is really interested in and pull those big sponsors in. We just never know.
Wow, yeah, that's like it's really exciting stuff, man. Yeah, 3,500 pounds of magazines. That was something that I'm still processing.
What a job to do. And interestingly enough, I don't think this has been announced anywhere. So this is breaking news on the podcast. We just recently bought Team and Trail magazine, and that just closed. That deal just closed Friday, I guess it was. What are we recording here on Tuesday? So Team and Trail, if you're not familiar, was a newsletter / magazine that was written in New Hampshire from 1963 to the early 2000s. So all of that mushing history from early 60s till they passed away in the early 2000s was covered in that newsletter. So we're now the proud owners of that as well, and we're going to incorporate that into Mushing and mushing.com and all of that. And all of the stories that are in those magazines. I mean, the folks that we bought it from, the Mollbergs, are big time racers back east. They're in their 70s now. And I sat down there and spoke with Deborah, the lady that we bought it from. And she didn't get a chance to race with, but she actually met Leonard Seppala a couple of times back in the day. And that's some history. I mean, that you're talking about mushing and history of our sport in Alaska. There's no bigger name than Leonard Seppala. I mean, that was the Tom Brady way back in the day.
Yeah, that's literally the OG.
The OG.
The guy that did the original serum run and saved the day and
right.
In Nome when they had a diphtheria outbreak. And it's part of the reason that the Iditarod exists, if not the whole reason, is that story, and the existence of the Iditarod Trail, of course, and which has its own history and gold and that's I think that's something that is really in Alaska and certainly specifically in the mushing world. It's really hard to like the internet does not have a lot of like history information. Like even if you were to look up like the biggest name in mushing, it's not that much info. Like look up Dallas Seavey online. You're gonna get like not what I'm looking for.
Yes.
And so now you've got this insane, just I'm right now, like I can't imagine how much Brendan and I would procrastinate the tasks that you have ahead of you. Like, dude, 3,500 magazines to be digitized.
3,500 pounds, not 3,500
pounds. Okay.
It's a huge task. And thankfully, my wife, she's a paralegal, works for the state of Alaska. So that's her job, is pushing paper, if you will. So she's going to take on that task of scanning page after page after page. And I'm sure we could find somebody that could do it cheaper than her time. But yeah, that's the big task to get that. And like you said, that amount of history and the searchability with that's the reason why we bought that. We want somebody to be able to search for who won the 1993 Iditarod and read a story about it. And whether it's text or audio or video or whatever that is, that's really lacking. And I think that it's going to be a really cool opportunity. It's sort of my retirement project, if you will, is to be able to do that and hold up that history. Because, if there are not people telling these stories on whatever platform, it's going to die. Kids today, they don't read anymore. They don't pick up books or anything. And if you have the opportunity to share that with them, I think that's an important thing. And that's what we're doing on this podcast, sharing those stories. And again, you guys are doing your thing. So Let me ask you guys a question since you guys have been doing this for a bit. First off, I'm very interested to have you guys on my show. I think it would be cool to cross promote on both sides. I think that is imperative that we do that now that we've reached out together. But what have you guys learned in this journey and this couple of years of doing this? Is it still fun? Is it a grind? Where's your status in this podcasting process, if you will? And I know, Sean, you got to go in a bit, so we'll keep this short.
So for me, as you know, like one of the main things as to why I am involved in this is like I genuinely am so interested in what Sean was doing, right? When he'd be out on a sled and he'd be breaking down what he's doing and like I'm like, man, you know, what if we just did this and recorded it essentially, you know? Um and so I have learned an incredible amount about the sport, especially for me. Like, you can't really watch the sport here in Atlanta, Georgia. It's not like there's coverage of the sport. And so it's been really awesome to learn more about it. And for me, like the ability to reach out to some of these mushers and have them on, and like they're also almost all the people we reach out to are like more than happy and more than willing to come on. And so it's been fun for us. The like business side of it, and I don't say business from like a making money standpoint, but like, you know, the behind the scenes of what a listener doesn't know, that part is not a lot of fun. Um, you know, that's probably like our downfall or our weakness. Um, and so, you know, that's probably an area that we could get better at. But I speak for myself, at least. I really enjoy doing this. And it's really nice for me because it's in a way keeps me connected with my brother. You know, if we weren't doing these recordings, maybe we wouldn't be talking as much, honestly. Like, I love him, but I don't talk to him all the time. But now that we're doing this, we talk a whole heck of a lot more. And it's also kind of something like, I'm proud of doing this with my brother. You know, like he doesn't live here. I don't see him at all, you know, maybe once or twice a year. So it's nice that we have something that is ongoing that keeps us connected. That was a really long answer, but Sean,
I mean, it's
that's my 2 cents.
Or a couple minutes, but yeah, no, I second everything you said. I think, you know, but obviously I've, you know, learned more about who's racing in 2024 or last year in 2023 and about the trails and the nuances of mushing just by having to kind of pay attention a little bit more. And then, you know, I think the thing that I've been most surprised about is, you know, the support from the mushing community. Just like, even, and it's not like, you know, it just they might listen to an episode or two, or, you know, if I see someone, you know, that they're like, dude, you're doing a podcast, and they're super interested about it. And some people just found out this weekend, you know, that I was handling for Eddie, helping him out with the start line or finish line or whatever, and he had some other friends helping him who had run races and stuff, and they're like, dude, you have a podcast? Like, what, about mushing? Like, they were just like, their eyes lit up. You know, it's so cool that, you know, you just put something positive out into the world, and then how receptive the people that are actually doing the thing are. You know, it's like almost in some ways, I feel like we're getting potentially more listeners that are actually like on a sled than they are, you know, sitting in Florida or whatever, you know. So yes, we have our armchair musher fans too, but that's what been most surprising for me, and how inclusive the mushing community was, and how intimidated I've always been by the mushing community, because I speak for all of the handlers that just are in Alaska for the first time learning about Alaskan Huskies and sled dogs. And I can't tell you how many times I've talked to another musher, and right next to them is their dog handler. and they're like, I don't know what to say. I haven't even been introduced yet into this conversation. I always try to make a point. My buddy Sean Rose, he always said this too. You know, anytime I'm talking to a musher and I see their handler next to them, I always make a point. Hey, how you doing? You know, I'm Sean. What's your name? You know, because it's intimidating. You know, sit there and you see Dallas Seavey on the TV, Brent Sass winning the Iditarod or whatever, and then next thing you know, you're at the Connect 200 and they're right there, and you're like, oh, I don't want to interrupt them. They're doing their thing with their dog. It's like, you know, just everybody's been. I was the one that got into my own way, and now we're doing this. Me and Brendan gives you a little bit more confidence, and then turns out people are actually super stoked that we're trying to do something here. You know, whatever. I don't even know what we're doing, dude. We're freaking winging it, and I don't even know what. Like, I don't even know what's going on, but here we are. You know.
Hey, that's fine. And you know, I think interestingly enough, Brendan, what you said is learning the sort of the back end of mushing. There's a reason why there's the NFL Network and ESPN and all that. I mean, they're on 24 hours a day talking about sports. You know, you can only say so much about the game, whatever game that is, but it's all those stories and all those storylines that people are really interested in. You know, they love watching their favorite team or their favorite athlete in whatever sport that is, whether it's Iditarod or, you know, the Green Bay Packers or whoever that is. But when you start telling those stories, that's where the key is, and that's where podcasting really shines. You know, I'm talking to the choir here. You guys know that when we hear those stories from those people, and then we're able to connect those people with their fans or their supporters or whoever, that's where it truly works. And it takes a little bit of time to really grab that momentum, whether you're doing podcasts or videos or whatever. But once you capture that essence of that, I think it's truly a winning combination. And I think that you guys are doing that. So before we go, guys, what are the plans for you guys? How can we help each other on the podcast networks, and what can we do to share the wealth, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, we want to cover, you know, those bigger we're basically the mid distance races of Alaska and the long distance races, which really is just the Iditarod at this point. And I guess you could maybe group in the longer, the halfway, the Quest 450, or maybe the Kobuk 440, the whatever, mid distance, long distance, whatever you want to call it. But I think I'm gonna be out on the Iditarod trail during the race, helping with Iditarod Insider. Maybe I'm still, like, you know, figuring out the details there. So Brennan might be taking a little bit more of it might be kind of taken over during the actual race. You know, maybe there's a way, you know, for Brennan and you to maybe help during the race, you know, just kind of keep checking in with each other.
Simulcast show on both feeds. We could do that.
Yeah,
that's
there's definitely something that we can kind of take offline and kind of figure out something. And I definitely think that being each other's resources is certainly something that's worthwhile, especially during the Iditarod. You know, that's the Super Bowl of the sport. And I think that is kind of why we got into this. Like, the Iditarod Insider is great, but that's pretty much the only one of a few resources that you really have, right? So, you know, being able to provide as much information, and people are information thirsty. They will take anything they can get in any form during the Iditarod. So yeah, I think there's a conversation to be had, and figure out some sort of way to kind of cross promote each other. And, you know, I mean,
brought up a good point about there's just not a lot of access, especially with the Insider. And we're huge hockey fans here in this family. And we watched the Seattle Kraken, the new NHL team down there. And if you don't have a streaming package, whether it be ESPN Plus or something like that, you can't watch the games because they're all blacked out, because it's our quote unquote local team. And that's sort of how Iditarod Insider is. If you don't pay up with a subscription, you don't have access to that. And if
Right.
there's a way to do that in whatever capacity to cover the sport, and whether it's podcasting or whatever, I think it's key, because people either don't want to or can't pay that subscription to follow the Insider. That's their own property of Iditarod, so they want to
Right.
keep tabs on that. So it's always interesting to see what new people are doing, or not new people, but other people are doing in the space. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I know we got to close here. Any final questions for me?
Yeah, I think, well, comments, I think that the Iditarod Insider is I view us as like supplemental to them, and I think they are the best coverage of the Iditarod. They're out there on the trail. You just can't beat that. And we're not trying to. We're trying to supplement that. We don't want to take away anything from them. I'm a huge fan of Iditarod Insider. We had Greg Heister on. He was awesome. I'm going to be hopefully going out there and working for them and helping with the coverage and seeing what I can bring to the table. I think something that I would like to ask your advice on, Robert, would be just kind of like, this is something that's zero interest from a listener's perspective, but whatever. Just the processes of like maybe the programs you use and what you do on the back end, and like streamlining the efficiency of recording to releasing and everything in between those two things, and equipment. And if you saw my setup right now, it's hilarious, dude. I got like my laptop on top of like a plastic cooler.
Hey, that's okay. People,
it's
They don't have to know that.
there are a million. We go to the largest podcasting conference in the world every August, and there are literally podcasts out there that have millions of downloads that are doing it on their laptop, in their closet, looking at their work suits, and that's what they're doing, and they're doing it right. So it's not necessarily the equipment or whatever. It's the process, and it's the story. I think that's an important thing. And Sean, we could definitely talk off air about recommendations for gear and all of that, and programs and workflow and all of that. But you would be surprised, guys, at how interested your listeners are with those sort of behind the scenes nuts and bolts, how the sausage is made type stuff is to them. They really enjoy that. One of the things that we do when we interview authors and filmmakers and that stuff is, they can talk about their book or their movie forever. But when you talk about the struggles of making that movie, or, there's a reason why people love bloopers of movies, because that's sort of the nuts and bolts on how things are made. And I think that bringing that perspective to our sport is very interesting. And like you said, Sean, we need to interview more handlers. We need to interview more volunteers and, the people that nobody hear from. And I think those are where the true stories are. Those are the people like on the Quest or the Copper Basin. Those are the people that are driving 1,000 miles from checkpoint to checkpoint, helping their musher come in just to pick up poop and lay down straw or whatever. Those are some real interesting stories for sure.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to be keeping that in mind in Glen Allen and at the checkpoints this coming weekend. Brendan?
So I was just going to say, just from a time perspective, in terms of wrapping things up, Robert, I wanted to give you the floor to just, if there's anything that you wanted to maybe promote or just anything else before we wrap up.
Nope. I appreciate the opportunity. You can find us over on mushing.com. That's sort of the site for us right now. We're doing a lot of work over there. We are on all socials with that. If you search for Mushing Magazine, our podcast is called Mushing Now, since we are Mushing Magazine. So you can find us on all platforms there as well. And I'll definitely promote this episode when it comes out, and definitely have you guys on in a week or two before that Iditarod craziness happens, and we'll definitely have you guys on for sure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us, Robert. And we'll continue to be in touch.
Yep, for sure. Take care, guys. I appreciate it.